feel that there's any actual questioning of the system of democracy, that people want something stronger, something more dictatorial?
The people certainly don't.
Do you think the Indian Communist Party, now it's split between China and Russia, can ever be effective in India?
As far as the Indian people are concerned, there is no question of China communists or Russian communists. The people here want some job. The people here wants to see that they increase their standard of living. That is the main question here.
One correspondent has said that this fourth general election may be India's last. Do you think this is a very pessimistic outlook?
It's not only pessimistic, it's entirely unfounded.
India is a big country. It has a long history. India has lived and endured for a long time. It will live and endure for a long time more.
आइए अब आपको पार्लियामेंट हाउस दिखाते हैं. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the Parliament House. The gate of this Parliament is always open for the public to come and see how our sovereign Parliament is functioning. Please follow me. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this side is the Lok Sabha, the House of the People, and this side the Rajya Sabha, the upper house, House of Lords. And this side is the central hall where we will be going. In the central hall, the main importance is that our constitution was framed in this very hall. And in the Lok Sabha sits the member whom you elect, through the public, general public, they come. And after every 5 years, there are elections for Lok Sabha, and the members of Rajya Sabha are elected by the legislative bodies of our states. And after every 2 years, 1/3 of the strength of Rajya Sabha are retired. The term is up to 6 years. Now, please follow me to the central hall.
A crowd of Indians comes to see where their democracy was born. And at Parliament in New Delhi, that democracy, housed in the imperial grandeur of the former British Raj, seems so sound, so orderly, so secure. Yet this reflection of Indian democracy, though attractive, is deceiving. For outside the capital lies another India, less of a nation than a notion, a country 2/3 the size of Europe, containing 520 million people with 845 languages and dialects. And after 20 years of democracy, that other India seems to have changed little. Its poverty little altered, its population increasing by 1 million every month, its food production falling disastrously short of its needs. Use the loop contraceptive, proclaim the posters. Limit your family to 2 children. But like democracy itself, the posters can only urge, only advise. They scarcely touch the traditional patterns of Hindu life and death. Yet, despite its staggering problems and its creaking political system, India today votes in her 4th general election. Since 3/4 of the voters are illiterate, symbols are used on posters and ballot papers. Big parties have fixed signs, the small ones can choose. And there's a scramble for the right election image, whether it's scales for the just or lions for the courageous. Indian democracy lumbers on. But in the country, political disillusion is greater than ever before. A leading political commentator, Indra Malhotra, tells why.
The reasons are basically political, somewhat psychological. We, from a period of great enthusiasm and exuberance, are come down to a period when the elan is completely missing. Nehru is dead. Even during his last years, there was this tremendous trauma of Chinese invasion. People haven't recovered from that. We had started recovering from it, as you might have noticed, after the brief war with Pakistan, when the nation's solidarity was at its highest. Everybody was very happy. But then Shastri died, the new regime took over, it never settled down. And there is this great feeling as if things don't move, as if the leadership cannot carry the country with it. I think that more than anything else is responsible for this general disillusionment of despondency and disappointment.
But the election campaign is a time for disillusion to be hidden and for the politicians to weave illusions for the next 5 years. The Prime Minister, Mrs Gandhi, in a tiring whistle-stop schedule, has visited nearly every state in the Union in the last 2 months to bolster the sagging rule of the Congress Party. At Kharagpur, a railway town in West Bengal, she proved that as Prime Minister and the daughter of the beloved Nehru, she was still the biggest crowd puller in the country. Mrs Gandhi's task in this election hasn't been easy. Gone are the days when Nehru's India could speak as the non-aligned third force in the world. The Chinese invasion and the India-Pakistan war changed all that. The magnetic leader is gone, and the Congress Party of Gandhi and Nehru, that won independence for India, has been in power for 20 unbroken years. At last, its supreme hold on the country is being challenged, and the bouquets look a little faded now. Mrs Gandhi's climb to the leadership of the Congress Party hasn't gone unchallenged. But for the people, especially in the countryside, some of the Nehru magic has rubbed off onto her, and she remains for Congress the compromise leader among the warring strongmen of the party. Mrs Gandhi's trump card is that Congress has governed India since independence, and no other party in previous elections, even the second-placed Communists, has ever polled 10% of the votes. So the choice, says Mrs Gandhi, is Congress or chaos. Up to this part of the tour, Mrs Gandhi's meetings had been peaceful and orderly. But over the country, Congress leaders had been stoned and silenced in a wave of violence that had been building up for months. As Mrs Gandhi flew to Calcutta, she little knew a broken nose was in store for her the next day. On her campaign plane, I asked Mrs Gandhi about the danger to Indian democracy of this build-up of violence.
Well, if violence were to increase, or the tendency of the opposition parties to disrupt meetings or peaceful people's speeches and so on, then of course it does make, democracy cannot exist in the same way. But I must say I have tremendous confidence in the Indian people, and I think that they will not allow this kind of violence.
You don't feel that in these critical years there's any actual questioning of the system of democracy? That people want something else, something stronger, something more dictatorial?
The people certainly don't. But opposition parties who feel that they may not have a chance through elections, see, they are the people who indulge in this type of violence. If you've got a program and a policy which can attract people, then you will be anxious to put it forward. It's when there's a lack on that front that you have to make it up by creating disturbance.
One correspondent has said that this fourth general election may be India's last. Do you think this is a very pessimistic outlook?
It's not only pessimistic, it's entirely unfounded.
At Calcutta's parade ground, anyway, all was peaceful, even dull, as Mrs Gandhi addressed a crowd of 250,000. All Mrs Gandhi's speeches couldn't hide the fact that Congress, under her leadership, is an ailing party. The Indian president himself declared 1966 the worst year since independence. And this year, there's famine, countrywide strikes and violence, rocketing prices, and squabbles over sacred cows. All these have dimmed the reputation of a party that has ruled India for as long as the young can remember.
मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई देख के कि कुछ महीने पहले जब मैं ये सूखाग्रस्त क्षेत्रों में घूम रही थी तो जनता की भावना क्या थी। बहुत से लोग आज हमारे अखबार पढ़ते हैं और बाहर से आए हैं अखबार वाले दूसरे।
For the masses, Mrs Gandhi is no spellbinder. She has none of that visionary appeal of her father Nehru. And though it's clear that she and Congress will be returned to power, the cheers will hardly be loud and strong through the land. Congress's massive domination of Indian politics has only been threatened once, far away to the south in Kerala, the land of coconuts and communists. In the 1957 elections, the state of Kerala voted a communist government into power. It didn't last long, but since then, the communists in Kerala have been aiming high. The communists have made Kerala the problem state of India for the Congress central government, which has had to dissolve the state parliament twice in the past 10 years because no stable government could be formed. This election, the communists are trying to make sure of a safe majority by leading a united front of all the opposition parties against Congress. This campaign has been so successful that Congress have virtually written off the state as a certain loss. The communists are weak in the rest of India and split, since the Chinese invasion, into pro-Chinese and pro-Russian wings. But in Kerala, the two wings are united for the election at least. What makes the communist message so strong in Kerala and weak elsewhere, in a backward country that seems so ripe for a great revolutionary upheaval and a place in the communist heaven? The answer isn't to be found in election speeches. Communist election slogans dominate in Trivandrum, the capital. It's a clean, orderly town whose people have none of the resignation and apathy of the north. It has a place in history too, as the first state in the world where a communist government came to power by votes and not by violence. It lasted only 2 years, but in all elections since, communists have remained the largest party, but unable to form a government. Like all parties in Kerala, they make sure their message gets across at election time, on every available space. Congress in Kerala is split and discredited. Its only hope of power would be a breakup of the Communist United Front after the election. Kerala, though one of the smallest and poorest Indian states, is the best educated. The Christian church has been the decisive factor in its educational advance. A quarter of the population is Christian, and the Christian religion arrived here in the 1st century AD. The 19th century brought the Christian missionaries with their European-style churches and their European zeal for education. It was a most un-Indian development. Nearly half the schools in Kerala are still run by churches, but the impetus they gave made the local Hindus educationally aware. The important Hindu castes, unlike the rest of India, began 50 years ago to run their own schools too. The local princes were democratic and enlightened. It all made for high literacy. At university level, Kerala also leads India. But here the classic seeds of communism are sown, for there are few jobs for the 3,000 graduates it produces each year. Some even become bus conductors. High literacy and high unemployment equal political discontent. And the educated aren't the only communist target, for in the countryside they've cultivated the low-caste peasants. The peasants face the same problem as the educated. The countryside is overpopulated and underemployed, and the communists with their touring plays and propaganda have seized their chance. Kerala is unique in India. Elsewhere, traditional religions stifle communism. Here, their message is loud and clear. So Kerala remains a bizarre outpost of communism in the Indian continent. And top communist leaders like A.K. Gopalan seem disastrously split over Russia and China, as I found out when I talked to him on his tour of Kerala. Do you think the the Indian Communist Party, now it's split between China and Russia, can ever be effective in India?
No, question is, as far as the Indian people are concerned, there is no question of China communists or Russian communists. Here the question is, after independence, the people here want some job, the people here wants to see that they increase their standard of living. That is the main question here. No. So if you mix up, you see China or Russia, and then say something, you see the people here, that is not their problem, is that they want, you see, that whatever development is there, the people must have a share in that development.
But I'm not mixing it up. It's the Indian Communist Party that have split into two parts and are even fighting each other in the election.
That is an ideological thing. That has nothing to do with the administration and other things of the people.
But you can't get together. You can't get together.
That is another question, you see. Whether we can, in course of time, suppose, you see, we think that, correct ourselves if you are wrong. That is another question.
Why hasn't the Indian Communist Party ever been very effective in India? Why hasn't it made an appeal to the people?
No, Indian Communist Party had been very effective, and it is becoming more effective. That is why the Congress is coming down, and the Congress is Indira Gandhi is getting stones, Maharaj is beaten. So that does not show that is it.
Congress is coming down, says Gopala. Gradually, perhaps. But apart from Kerala, the communists in India certainly aren't going up. Far away to the north is princely Jaipur, where even the pigeons seem aristocratic. Jaipur is the capital of Rajasthan, which, as the name implies, is a state of rajas and princes and palaces. The city of Jaipur itself is full of pink and white palaces, all belonging to the former ruler, the millionaire Maharajah of Jaipur. Here, the princes ruled until Indian independence in 1947. Then they gave up their territories to the new Indian government in exchange for annual tax-free privy purses. The new Indian Democrats thought the old princely order had gone. But in this year's elections, 200 Maharajahs, Maharanis and princelings have returned to public life to add to Congress's troubles. In Jaipur and Rajasthan, they're out in force, mainly standing for the right-wing Swatantra Party. Their most famous candidate is a member of the international set and a friend of the British royal family, the Maharani of Jaipur.
Mrs. Gandy hinted that if the princes got too strong in politics, she might cut off the privy purses which were given to them, the money given to them in exchange for them giving up their sovereignty at independence. Is this a real threat, do you think, that you might get your money cut off?
Well, they've amended the Constitution 19 times in their favour and against the people of India, so it wouldn't be surprising if they did this again.
But would this be a worrying factor for you, I mean, financially for the princes?
Not at all. I think then more princes would come out, and then it would be a headache for the Congress.
Do you think there is a real yearning amongst the people of India for a return of the princes?
No, I don't think there is. But in what used to be the Indian states, you see, people don't understand why it is that nobody listens to their grievances today. And of course, they don't. They can't understand why it is that the price of grain has shot up to such a fabulous extent. They don't understand why things are more expensive. They don't understand why they always have to give a bribe before they get anything done for them. And these are the things that that's why they look back on the old days as having plenty to eat, and also they're paying far more taxes now than they ever paid before in the Indian states.
Think of the good old days might well be the slogan for the Indian Prince's campaign. And the people on the steps of the Raj Mahal Palace in Jaipur hardly behave like voters, more like subjects.
होने वाले थे संविधान में उसको भी हमारे स्वतंत्र पार्टी के सदस्यों ने
Some of the princes have been drawing great crowds campaigning in their Rolls Royces. The Maharani's electioneering gets underway in air-conditioned American comfort. The first stop is a village just outside the city. Rajasthan, like all other Indian states except Kerala, has always voted Congress since independence. But with the Maharani leading a glamorous field of princely candidates, the Swatantra Party hopes to break Congress domination. The Maharani's message to the villagers is a short and bitter attack on Congress corruption. There's not a single honest Congress minister in the state, she tells them. So, vote Swatantra. She shows the illiterate villagers how to mark the star symbol on the ballot paper. From here on, the going is rougher, and a jeep is the only way to canvass. Jeeps are vital in Indian electioneering, and the princes, with their tax-free government incomes, can afford them. The Maharani's almost feudal progress is nicely balanced with an American democratic approach, informal wayside stops and Swatantra badges for the children.
पब्लिक के सामने आती है और उनको कहते हैं कि देखिए ये हमारे सिद्धांत है और हम आपकी प्रतिनिधित्व करना चाहते हैं.
The princes, Mrs Gandhi reminded the electorate, crushed the poor and supported the British. The Maharani's reply is effectively simple. I could live comfortably in my palace, but because of your sufferings, I have to take the plunge into politics. It's ironic that modern India has seen this resurgence of princes. Under Nehru, they were cowed or else supported Congress. Now they've come out into the open against the government. It's yet another sign of the waning power of Congress in the country. It's easy to be gloomy about Indian democracy, especially at election times when violent divisions come to the surface. But there seem to be no ready alternatives to democracy. Typically, the Indians themselves have cultivated a resigned optimism.
Well, final outcome, I do not think that these elections are going to decide, although they are very important. They come at a very crucial stage in India's development. These elections may or may not solve the problem, but even assuming that they make it worse than before. But then India is a big country, it has a long history. And these fears that if the elections don't solve our problems, we might disintegrate or finish is not justified at all. India has lived and endured for a long time. It will live and endure for a long time more. A pond perhaps gets polluted and putrefies, but an ocean doesn't. An ocean is never polluted. You see, it's like an ocean, probably will go on.